Hello, world. Welcome to the new normal. My name is Jason Troxel. I'm the Chief Digital Experience Officer at Techolution, and I'm here today to start a new series. This is called the new normal, and it's going to be focused a lot on healthcare, but also generally speaking, where technology will benefit the entire world as we shift to what will be our future. We know that right now things are in an inflection point. We have made so many changes that now require us to think about how we move forward. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to do that. So I hope you'll join me on this journey. This will be the first of what I believe to be many vlogs, video podcasts, and I even have some designs to put some guests on here. But today I want to start off with an inaugural topic. And it's really kind of timely because recently there was an article and Kevin Scott, the CTO of Microsoft, was quoted in that article as saying, I think our reaction to this horrible pandemic we're having now could produce a wave of investment and innovation in biotechnology that defines the next 75 years, the way that industrialization of the modern world post-World War II has defined the past 75. Now, obviously, Kevin also was out there advertising his new book. His book is Reprogramming the American Dream, From Rural America to Silicon Valley, Making Artificial Intelligence Serve Us All. And that book is available now. So I read that and it resonated with me. I think we do have an opportunity right now to change the world. And I'm really excited about that. In healthcare specifically, the FCC also published a new document in the last month. FCC document 20-44, Telehealth, Telemedicine, and Connected Care Services. You can look that up, but I'm going to kind of go through some pieces of that today as part of this first inaugural meeting. And I think it's important because this is an opportunity that not only is because of where we're at in time, but because the government has pivoted to provide us some opportunities that we can use right now to make the most of this. So what is it? On March 17th, 2020, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services announced that they're going to relax their telehealth restrictions. That's the first big pin I wanted to bring your attention to. Those restrictions on Medicare, and they will now allow program funds to be spent on telehealth services to broaden the number of patients who can be treated and reduce the need for sick patients to travel for treatment to and within major population centers. Okay, in plain English, you don't have to leave your home to get a routine care or checkup now. That's important, especially for the elderly. But I think it applies broadly because as part of the CARES Act, Congress has approved first dollar coverage for telehealth medicine. That's insanely important to know because what that means is if your employer has authorized telemedicine on a plan, that your plan now has an opportunity to call up via telemedicine and not have to pay a copay. Let's say the popularity of high deductible health plans has really grown. So now you have a high deductible health plan with a healthcare savings account attached to it. In just 2 months ago, if you wanted to use telemedicine, you were paying the full price up until your deductible was met. Now, under this CARES Act, that first dollar coverage is approved. And it's not just approved during COVID-19 because one, we don't know how long it'll last, but really we want to make sure that it's entrenched. So Congress has approved this for the next 2 years. That means an average patient sitting at home has to make a decision. Do I go to the doctor with an out-of-pocket cost and an out-of-pocket deductible as my first step, or do I call them via telemedicine? I predict, we at Techolution predict, this is going to drive a massive uptick in telemedicine and telehealth and connected health services. So this is a great opportunity to get in. But beyond that, this FCC document 2044 gives us a lot more. And let me go through some of those points. The Department of Health and Human Services also announced that it will waive potential penalties for inadvertent and good faith violations of the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. That's HIPAA. They're doing this to encourage healthcare providers to use telehealth services to treat potentially sick patients and further encourage the broader use of telehealth by notifying healthcare providers they do not need to collect the usually required copays for patients receiving that. I just mentioned that. So here are two huge, ginormous benefits. Relaxation of HIPAA, and to the extent that if it's an inadvertent or a good faith violation, you won't be penalized. I mean, there's a lot of regulation around HIPAA. And in the past, inadvertent and accidental were still penalized. This is a big change. That means the government recognizes, and they're endorsing this. First dollar coverage waived. That's awesome. All right. On March 24th of this year, the Health and Human Services awarded $100 million to 1,381 health centers funded through the Health Resources and Service Administrations, that's HRSA, to address screening and testing needs, acquire medical supplies, and boost telehealth capacity. Telehealth, again, big, huge effort. And they're doing this in response to the coronavirus pandemic. The COVID-19 telehealth program will be open to eligible healthcare providers and will provide eligible healthcare providers support to purchase telecommunications, information services, and connected devices to provide connected care services in response to the coronavirus pandemic. That means, just to put it in very plain English, there is money on the table for you to use as a healthcare establishment or provider to implement new technologies that support telemedicine. And it's not going away. At least the next 2 years we see this. And if widespread adoption is gained, I expect an extension on that until the entire industry is self-supporting, and then like ATMs, you'll get fees associated with. But that transition from free ATMs, government waived ATM fees up until the point where it was entrenched, and then of course they let it go. But still, think of the savings right now in the immediate future, and think about the savings long term as it applies to telemedicine. Now, it's not just enough to say it causes savings. I don't think that in itself is an impetus for us to change. But what does happen here, what is interesting here, is that as you push into telemedicine, all of these connected care services, smart bands, blood pressure cuffs, connected thermometers, connected scales, all this stuff is going to start coming together to give us a much better healthcare visibility and capabilities in the industry. And like Kevin Scott says, this is the inflection point for the next 75 years. We have the opportunity to change the path we've been on. And in fact, we don't just have the opportunity, we have the requirement, because the world has changed. Things we knew to be true just 3 months ago will not be true in the future. That is the new normal. That's why we're here. All right. It is important to note that this COVID-19 telehealth program will only fund monitoring devices that are themselves connected. So I did mention connected care services. So smart bands that you can record stuff and then send, that's not covered right now. There will be other programs. In fact, I think there are other programs for that. And over the course of this series, we can get into that. But for this specific money I'm talking about today, the specific FCC document 2044, right now, this is specifically for those telehealth programs that are connected in real time and can put a medical professional together with a patient across remote distances. Now, more money on the table. I mentioned the $100 million that went out to those 1,381 health centers. That was originally done by HHS. That was back on March 24th, 2020. Congress has then since appropriated or apportioned $200 million budget. And in order to ensure that as many applicants are possible as possible can receive this funding, they anticipate not awarding more than $1 million per applicant. So you're roughly looking at 200 applications or more that are available today, and they're going to continue doing this until either they run out of money or COVID-19 is over. Now, from what I heard on Small Business Administration, I think they burned through their money real quick. So it could be that we actually burn through this money, that this money is apportioned out, and then shortly thereafter, they have to add more money to it. So I anticipate seeing a continual funding in this, because this is a great place, one, to keep America working. This is putting money back into the economy, and that's a great thing at this time. And two, it's getting us closer to our destination. Our destination is to apply smarter technology. All right, so how do you get the money? There's an application process. In fact, they built a specific COVID-19 application process that differs from their normal connected health or connected care services funding. And if you went to OMB, you'll find that. But in addition to the application process itself, a few things are applicable here. And one of them, it goes back, and it's the legalese, but it goes back to the 1996 Act and CARES Act that limits the program to nonprofit and public eligible healthcare providers that fall within the categories of healthcare providers that I'll tell you in a second. But let's summarize that. What that means is that if you're a technology company right now in health tech, or if you're a hospital and looking to get health tech applied, we got to bring these two partners together. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But to right now, The exciting thing is this money is available and there's a way to get it. And here's the way. So if you fall into any of these 8 categories, you're eligible to apply for that money now. The first category being post-secondary educational institutions, offering healthcare instruction, teaching hospitals and medical schools. I go to Johns Hopkins. I'm finishing my degree at Johns Hopkins in finance here in the summer. That would be an institution that falls into this category. There are many, many others. This just happens to be one that I'm proud of. I thought I'd throw that out there. Community health centers or health centers providing health care to migrants are eligible. Local health departments or agencies are available for this money. Community mental health centers, not-for-profit hospitals, rural health clinics, skilled nursing facilities, or a consortia of healthcare providers consisting of any combination of the ones above, one or more combinations. So that really is who this money is targeted to. And in general, that's the right place to put the money, because you want the companies that need to be able to identify the needs they have. So as a technology provider, I'm in health tech, and we're sitting here wondering how we can help. Then what we need to be doing is reaching out to those hospital partners saying, where do you need to implement? What can we do to support you? Also, the FCC has established a separate streamlined application process that I mentioned. So to be considered for the participation in the COVID-19 telehealth program, if you're interested, eligible healthcare providers must submit applications at a minimum containing quite a bit of information. So let me go through that. General speaking, who are you? Your name, address, county, healthcare provider number if that's available. For healthcare providers seeking funding for the COVID-19 telehealth program application, and the lead healthcare provider for applications involving more than one hospital. So if you're a consortium, you need to identify who's in charge, who's the single voice that will be discussed with. Next up is contact information for the individual to be responsible. So they want a single POC. That's pretty obvious, but throw that out there: telephone number, mailing address, and email address. All right, now we're going to get into the meat of the stuff. You need to have a description of the anticipated connected care services to be provided. You need to identify the conditions to be treated and the goals and objectives. So this is your program, your description. And you're going to have to explain how this will benefit your COVID-19 impact response. In other words, this isn't just, hey, we want money for healthcare. This is, tell me one of two conditions. Tell me how this immediately helps your COVID-19 impact response efforts, or if the money is not going to be used for COVID-19, but is instead used to help free up resources that are working on other things so that they are now available to work on COVID, then you need to describe that as well. Okay. In addition to that, they would like to see a description of the estimated number of patients to be treated. In other words, what's the impact? How much scope and scale? The description of the telecommunications services, information services, or devices necessary to enable the provision of telehealth services would need to be described. The total amount of funding requested, as well as the total monthly amount of funding requested for each eligible item, especially if you're doing managed services with a technology company on a monthly basis, if there are some sort of licensing costs associated with the software or the services you get. All these things have to be packaged up and put into your application. Again, if you're requesting funding for devices, you have to also include a description of all the types of devices for which funding is being requested, how those devices are an integral part to your patient care, and whether the devices are for patient use or for the health care provider's use. In other words, is this is an application for a new computer system that the healthcare workers will use, or is it for a new monitoring system that you want to have patients use? And that description needs to be added. Okay. Also, a final note there, again, on those devices, it's very important to note, only connected devices are really being considered. Monitoring devices for pulse, oxygen, BP monitor, those are funded and not the remote connected devices. Okay. You need to include some supporting documentation for the costs indicated in your application, such as a vendor or service provider quote, invoice, or similar information. And again, this is where I think the partnership between health tech and health care really comes together, because as a provider, as a person who works with healthcare companies, I do this all the time for them. I put together the quote of what we're going to accomplish, the objectives, the required costs, the required resourcing to do that, the timeline, and that, by the way, timeline is the last requirement I want to talk to you about. You have to have a timeline for deployment of the proposed service and a summary for the factors that applicant intends to track that can be help measure the real impact of the supported services and devices. So again, we do that. That's what we specialize in, is helping companies recognize their pain points, quantifying their pain points through data analysis, and through deep dive, and then putting together a package for them to be able to go forward and say, here was what it takes for us to address this pain point. Here is our return on investment. Here's our timeline, and oh well, as well, here is our break-even cost, time to break-even cost. So this is really great news in amidst a horrible, horrible time, and I don't want to lose sight of the fact that people are suffering, people are dying, people are scared. The fear index here is definitely pegged out. What I do want to point out is that it's an opportunity for us to come together and find meaning out of this chaos, for us to find a path forward that we can all resonate around and band together to create a better results in our healthcare and healthcare practices. So again, I appreciate you tuning in today. This is, again, our first inaugural video log of this, and I anticipate continuing to do this as we start to define the new normal. I look forward to you joining me again in the near future. If you have any questions, please post them, and I'll try and respond to them as quickly as possible. Take care. I'm Jason Troxel for Techolution. By the way, if you want to reach out to Techolution, you can reach us at techolution.com, or you can reach me at jason.troxel@techolution.com. Thank you so much.